Hello and welcome to The Insider, a show designed to clue you into the biggest news, events, and announcements inside the video games industry. Discussing with you some things you may know, some things you may not, and the glue holds it all together, a little bit of my own opinion. My name is Paul James, thank you very much for watching, and let's get through the episode. So, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is finally coming back. Now, of course, the Old Republic sort of franchise from Star Wars, the sub-franchise of Star Wars there, has kind of existed for quite some time now. We obviously got the original two games, KOTOR 1 and 2, but then it's lived on through the form of the Old Republic for quite some time now. But it looks like, and it's only rumours, it's only speculation, it's only some reports, suggest that KOTOR is coming back. And in this week's episode of The Insider, we're going to break down all that news, what it means, what you can expect, who's developing it, when we're playing it, all those sorts of details, and we'll begin that next.
Everything we value will die unless we hold the line. This war isn't about politics or resources. We fight for survival, for freedom, for the Republic!
So there's not a hell of a lot that we really know about what this game is just yet. But one thing has been made crystal clear through these reports and rumours, is that this game is designed to pull together both Knights of the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic 2, so presumably in some sort of reimagining form, so that this game fits in the Star Wars canon. So what we can read into that is the original forms of the game, they don't. They like the ideas, they like the setting, they like the characters, all those sorts of things, but the way it's been assembled doesn't quite fit how Lucasfilm wants things to be. But if they can execute in a particular fashion, then all of a sudden a new reimagined version of Knights of the Old Republic does suddenly wedge itself nicely into the newly established Disneyverse take of the Star Wars canon. And that bodes really, really well. Next, we're going to begin to talk about who might be responsible for this game.
They thought they had banished us forever. But now, finally, we have returned.
It's important to note, before speculation gets too rampant about who might be making this game, it's really important that we take note of who actually owns the Star Wars license and for how much longer. EA still owns this thing until at least 2023, and given the recent success that Respawn achieved with Jedi Fallen Order, the many improvements in Star Wars Battlefront 2, there's reason to think that EA and Disney might continue that partnership well into the future, whether we like it or not. And I'd imagine, people themselves are starting to turn a little bit based on the output of those two recent titles. So keep our thoughts and our focus purely on EA and its studios here. So let's begin to go through them. We've got Motive, which is a team that worked on the campaign for Battlefront 2, and it's certainly, especially these days with all the improvements to Battlefront 2, it is the weakest part of the game. But there's a huge amount of talent there at that studio, at that portion of that studio, and there's no reason to think why they wouldn't be somehow involved, even if they're not the primary team. You've got EA DICE. They're the team been responsible for the core workings of Battlefront and Battlefront 2, and unless this thing's going to be a first-person shooter, I think you can probably toss them out as a potential option. Their strengths reside with first-person shooters, whether that's in the form of Battlefield or Battlefront, and I don't expect that to change in this case. You've also got the new, they're not new, but the really transformed version of EA DICE LA. Now, recently, Vince Zampella has come across from Respawn, again, recently responsible for Apex Legends and, of course, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and he is there to basically create more of a culture at the studio, create a direction for that studio that is not just simply, we're going to support the core team of DICE, we're going to do our own things. And with someone like Vince at the helm and a new direction, it's not outlandish to assume that maybe they're somehow involved, maybe they're the lead developers. But what game are they making? What what experiences does Vince and the other team bring to this game? Because of course Vince is known for first-person games and now Jedi Fallen Order, but still not an RPG. So will he have something to do with it? Will his team have something to do with it? That remains to be seen. Then there is, of course, Respawn. We can't rule them out given how versatile they've proven to be in the last few years. They're known for their first-person shooters. So keep in mind, the Vince and many members of this studio actually hail from the glory days of Call of Duty with the original Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, and the peak of the franchise there. And they brought those talents across and they developed Titanfall and Titanfall 2 and Apex Legends, and then they pivoted and developed Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is a third-person action game with Souls-like elements. It couldn't be further from what their core skills, their history dictated they would make. And yet, it's one of the best games of the year, in my humble opinion. So there's no reason to think why they couldn't also be working on this game. But next we'll talk about who I think it quite obviously is. Let's be real here. It's BioWare. BioWare are the original developers of Knights of the Old Republic. They didn't do Knights of the Old Republic 2, that was Obsidian, and they're now owned by Xbox, so you can strike them from the potential list unless this was another one of the many partnerships and deals that was established before the purchase. But I suspect in the case of this isn't one of those things, because Microsoft probably wouldn't go near them with the number of projects that they were actually managing. So it's BioWare. Let's assume it's BioWare. Then let's look at how this could possibly come together. We've got the awesome team who's been working on the Old Republic. In fact, if you want to learn about that, go and check out my Dev Diary interview with Ben Irving. It's on podcast services now. He was working there on Anthem and Star Wars The Old Republic. He'll be able to tell you a lot about that studio and what they're up to. But they're really quite preoccupied with their existing titles, so you can probably rule them out. Then we've got the Edmonton team. And we know that Dragon Age is bubbling along there. So even if we think within BioWare and what they're up to, it's hard to really land on a clear, concise method with which this is going to come together. But you have to assume that they are the ones that are handling this project in some way, shape or form. It's their IP, they are the top tier team when it comes to RPG development within EA, in spite of what we've seen in recent years. They know how to make an RPG, they know how to do it better than anyone else in that studio, and still better than basically anyone else out in the world for the most part. And they've got the experience with this franchise. It stands to reason that they would be the ones to pick up the torch and continue with it. I'm really excited about that prospect, and you should be too. So how does this thing play? Because the Old Republic, or Knights of the Old Republic, is quite an old game now. Keep in mind, this is an original Xbox game. We're talking 2002, 2003 here. That window is when we were seeing these games. Very, very early in the millennium, the century, more than a decade ago. It's quite some time. Games have changed a lot. The way we play RPGs has changed a lot. We've seen what The Witcher has done. We've seen what BioWare titles since have done in the form of Mass Effect and Dragon Age. There's a lot that's changed about this industry in those years. And if they were to basically just reskin this game and put it out there again with the same mechanics, it's not going to end well. And that's not to say that they're bad games, but the tastes of gamers have changed. In fact, they're brilliant games, but the tastes of gamers have changed, and I think you're only going to enjoy those old games if you have that nostalgic attachment to them. What I would look to see BioWare do, or whoever it is that ultimately picks up the mantle on this game, if all of this is true in the first place, is for them to adopt a model that Square Enix has actually taken on board when it comes to the development of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. What you've got in that game are a combination of real-time combat and the turn-based stuff, if that's what you're looking for. They're giving people a bit of both. They're respecting the past whilst also acknowledging the current day and the trends that the games industry has pursued and followed and executed on over the course of the last, well, in the case of Final Fantasy VII, 25 years since it came out, give or take. BioWare can and should look to do the same here. So I would be hoping that anyone there, they're not looking to create the exact same game that we're seeing in Final Fantasy VII Remake. That's its own thing, and it could be one of the games of the year this year, but I still wouldn't be copying that. You've got to work within the constraints of what you're developing, the constraints set by the original game, because you need to still respect that, and create the best possible product. And I expect that they're capable of doing that.
In the darkness, only ambition will guide you.
And that concludes this week's episode of The Insider. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing. All those buttons are down the bottom here, and hit that notification bell, that way you're alerted to every new video the moment it goes live on the channel. That includes Patched, more of The Insider, Player 2 Plays, Elite Game Review, Gamer School, and a whole bunch more. We've got some great stuff there, please be sure to go and check it out. Visit the website, player2.net.au, where you find reviews, previews, opinion pieces, news, features, links to our podcast series, Patched, which also has an audio form, the Player 2 Pixelcast, which is back for a new year, and Dev Diary, which I mentioned earlier in this episode, which actually has Ben Irving of BioWare, responsible for Anthem and Star Wars The Old Republic. He's the latest guest. He's got some great stories to tell, so go and check that out. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/player2au, kicking a few bucks. At the lower tiers, you'll get early access to episodes. At the higher tiers, monthly episode exclusives. And then there's Twitter. You can find me at Paul James Games, the website you find at player2au. And until next time, that has been a whole bunch of rumours and speculation relating to Knights of the Old Republic. I hope all of it is correct. I hope that I was somewhere on the money. But until that point, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.